My son picked up my medals, turned them over in his hands, and laughed. "Mom, these are fake," Ethan said loud enough for the whole room to hear. "You probably bought them online." The room went silent. My granddaughter froze mid-breath. My daughter-in-law smirked. I felt something inside my chest crack, but I didn't cry. I just looked at him and said quietly, "They were never your father's." And that was the moment everything fell apart. If you're listening to this and your heart already feels a little heavy, I understand. Before we go further, I'd really like to know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Stories like this feel different depending on the hour, don't they? And if you believe families should never humiliate each other like this, maybe leave a like. It helps more than you think. If you've ever been misunderstood by someone you love, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about my own life. After that night, I didn't sleep. I sat alone in my small house in Columbus, Ohio, long after the echoes of Ethan's voice had faded. The silence felt heavier than any argument ever could. It pressed against my chest, filled every corner of the room, settled into the spaces where laughter used to live. I still had my coat on. I hadn't even realized it until I noticed my hands trembling. Not from the cold, but from something much deeper. Something older. Something I had buried for decades. The wooden box sat on the coffee table in front of me. I hadn't opened it in years. Not really. Not the way I used to. Not the way you do when something still belongs to your present instead of your past. But that night, I couldn't stop staring at it. Ethan's words kept replaying in my mind. They're fake. I let out a quiet breath, one that felt like it carried the weight of a lifetime. Slowly, I reached forward and opened the box. The medals were still there, just as they had always been. Polished, untouched, silent. They didn't look fake. They never had. But I understood why he thought they were. Because I had made sure no one would ever believe they were real. I picked one up, letting it rest in my palm. It was heavier than people expect. Medals always are. They carry more than metal. They carry decisions, moments, lives. And sometimes secrets. I closed my eyes for a moment, and suddenly I wasn't in my living room anymore. I was somewhere else, somewhere far away from Ohio. But I forced myself back. Not yet, I told myself. Not yet. I stood up and walked toward the hallway, my footsteps slow, almost uncertain. The house felt different now. Smaller. Quieter. As if it knew something had changed. On the wall hung a photograph of my late husband, Thomas Whitman. He was smiling in that picture, broad-shouldered, confident, wearing the uniform everyone believed defined him. To the world, he had been the soldier, the hero, the man of honor. And I had let them believe that. Even Ethan, especially Ethan. I stepped closer to the photograph, studying his face. "I'm sorry," I whispered. Not because I had lied, but because I had told the wrong truth for too long. Thomas had been a good man, a kind man, but he had never earned those medals, and he knew it. We had made that choice together, years ago, for reasons Ethan would never understand, at least not yet. I reached up and adjusted the frame, slightly straightening it, even though it didn't need straightening. It was something I used to do when Ethan was little, when he would run through the house, bumping into things, laughing too loud, living too freely. Back when he believed I could do no wrong. Back when he would climb into my lap and ask questions about everything. "Mom, what did Dad do in the Army? Mom, were you ever scared? Mom, what's this medal for?" I used to smile and give him simple answers. Careful answers. Safe answers. Answers that would never lead him to the truth. Because the truth was never mine to tell. I turned away from the photo and walked into the kitchen. The clock on the microwave read 2:17 a.m. I hadn't eaten since the party, but I wasn't hungry. Grief does that. So does shame. But what hurt the most wasn't Ethan's words. It was the way he looked at me. Not with anger, not even with disappointment, but with certainty. As if he had already decided who I was. A liar? A fraud? A woman pretending to be something she wasn't. I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge a little tighter than I needed to. He doesn't know, I whispered to myself. But the words didn't comfort me, because deep down I knew the truth. He didn't know, because I never told him. Because I chose silence. Because I chose to let my own son believe a version of me that was easier for everyone. I walked back into the living room and sat down again, the wooden box still open in front of me. For a moment, I considered closing it, putting everything back where it belonged, pretending this night had never happened. But something inside me wouldn't let me. Instead, I reached deeper into the box beneath the metals, beneath the velvet lining. My fingers brushed against something I hadn't touched in years, a folded piece of paper, old, worn, dangerous. I froze. Even now, after all this time, it still felt like touching fire. I slowly pulled it out, holding it carefully as if it might fall apart in my hands. For a long moment, I didn't open it. I just stared at it, because I knew what was inside, and I knew what it meant. Not just for me, but for Ethan, for Lily, for everything. I swallowed hard. If he knew, I murmured. But I didn't finish the sentence, because the truth was I didn't know what would happen if he did. Would he understand? Or would it break him even more? Would it fix what had been shattered between us? Or would it prove that I had been lying to him his entire life? My hands lying to him his entire life. My hands tightened slightly around the paper. I thought about calling him. Right then. At 2:20 in the morning, I imagined his phone lighting up, my name on the screen. Would he answer, or would he let it ring, tightened slightly around the paper? I thought about calling him. Right then. At 2:20 in the morning, I imagined his phone lighting up, my name on the screen. Would he answer? Or would he let it ring just like he had done the past few times I tried? I let out a shaky breath and set the paper down on the table. No, not like this. Not yet. The truth wasn't something you throw at someone in the middle of the night. It was something that had consequences. And I had spent a lifetime managing those consequences. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. The house creaked softly, settling into the night. Somewhere in the distance, a car passed by. Life continued, as if nothing had changed. But everything had, because for the first time in years, I wasn't sure I could keep the past buried. Not after the look in Ethan's eyes. Not after the way Lily had watched me confused, uncertain, quietly asking a question no one answered. I closed my eyes again, and this time I didn't stop the memory from coming. It started the way it always did, with heat, with noise, with a voice shouting my name. Jacob, we need you. You, now. My eyes snapped open. I stared at the metals again, at the paper, at the life I had tried so hard to keep separated from the one I was living now. And for the first time in decades, I realized something I couldn't ignore anymore. The past wasn't finished with me. and sooner or later, it was going to demand the truth. The next morning came too quickly. I must have drifted off at some point, still sitting in that chair, because when I opened my eyes, sunlight was already creeping through the curtains. My neck ached, my hands were stiff, and for a brief, fragile moment, I forgot. Then it all came rushing back. Ethan's voice, the laughter, the look in his eyes. I sat up slowly, glancing toward the coffee table. The wooden box was still open. The medals were still there. The folded paper lay beside them untouched since the night before, proof that none of it had been a dream. I pressed my lips together and stood up, forcing myself to move. I needed something normal, coffee, routine, anything that could anchor me to the present. But even as I filled the kettle, my mind drifted back to the party, to Lily. Her birthday had been meant to be a happy day. Balloons, cake, laughter, those simple things that children remember long after they grow up. Instead, she had watched her father tear her grandmother apart. I closed my eyes briefly, gripping the edge of the sink. "She didn't deserve that," I whispered. Neither of us did. The kettle whistled sharply, pulling me back. I poured the water, watching the steam rise, curling into the air, like something trying to escape. Just like the truth. I carried the mug into the living room, but I didn't sit down. I couldn't. The space still felt heavy with everything that had happened. Instead, I paced, back and forth, as if movement alone could quiet the storm inside me. Ethan had always been stubborn. Even as a child, once he believed something, there was no changing his mind. I remembered one afternoon when he was about 7. He had insisted the neighbor's dog was dangerous, vicious, unpredictable. Nothing I said could convince him otherwise. It took weeks before he finally approached that dog, slowly, cautiously, and discovered it was the gentlest creature he'd ever met. He had laughed then, embarrassed but relieved. I was wrong, he had said, and I had hugged him proud that he could admit it. But this was different. This wasn't a misunderstanding about a dog. This was about me, about who he believed I was. And worse, he thought he had proof. I stopped pacing and let out a slow breath. That's what made it so hard. He hadn't just accused me blindly. He had done his research. He had checked his father's records. And he was right. Thomas Whitman had never received those medals, not a single one, which meant in Ethan's eyes there was only one conclusion. I had lied. I walked over to the bookshelf and pulled out an old photo album, one I hadn't opened in years. Dust clung to the edges, a quiet reminder of how long I had avoided the past. I flipped it open carefully. There he was, Ethan as a boy, grinning, missing his front teeth, holding a toy airplane in his hands. Thomas stood behind him, one hand on his shoulder, smiling proudly. And me? I was in the corner of the photo, slightly out of focus, as if I had never quite belonged in the picture. I traced the edge of the photograph with my finger. "You were so little," I murmured. Back then, everything had seemed simpler. We had our roles. Thomas, the decorated veteran. Me, the supportive wife. It was a story people understood, a story they respected. And I had let it stand, because the truth was complicated and dangerous. And at the time, it had felt easier to protect my family with a lie than to expose them to something they could never fully understand. But now that lie had turned against me. I closed the album, gently setting it aside. My eyes drifted toward my phone on the table. For a long moment, I just stared at it. Then slowly, I picked it up. My thumb hovered over Ethan's name. I hadn't called him since the party. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know what I could possibly say. What do you say to your own son when he thinks you're a fraud? Ethan? I whispered, as if saying his name aloud might somehow bridge the distance between us. I imagined the conversation. Would he answer? Would he listen? Or would he cut me off before I could even begin? My thumb trembled slightly. Then I lowered the phone. No, not yet. He wasn't ready. And if I called him now, all I would do is push him further away. I set the phone down and exhaled slowly. If I couldn't go to him, maybe someone else could come to me. Almost without thinking, I scrolled through my contacts until I found a familiar name. Lily. I hesitated. Was it right to call her? She was just a child. She shouldn't have to be caught in the middle of this. But then I remembered the way she had looked at me that night. Not accusing, not judging, just confused, like she was waiting for someone to explain. Before I could change my mind, I pressed call. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I was about to hang up when Grandma. Her voice was soft, cautious, but unmistakably relieved. My chest tightened. "Hi, sweetheart," I said gently. "I hope I didn't wake you." "No, I was already up," she replied. There was a pause, then she added quietly, "I was hoping you'd call." Something inside me broke a little at that. "I was thinking about you," I said. "About your birthday." "It wasn't a good birthday," she said bluntly. I closed my eyes. "I'm sorry. It's not your fault," she said quickly. "Dad shouldn't have said those things." Her words hung in the air between us. Simple, honest, and more painful than anything Ethan had said. "Lily," I began, unsure of how to continue, but she beat me to it. "Grandma," she said, her voice lowering, "are the medals really fake?" There it was. The question. The one I had spent years avoiding. I swallowed hard. "No," I said quietly. "They're not fake." "Then why did Dad say they were?" "Because he thinks he knows the truth. Because I made sure he only ever saw half of it." "Your dad?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "Your dad doesn't know the whole story." There was silence on the line. Then softly she asked, "Can you tell me?" I closed my eyes again. Part of me wanted to say yes, to tell her everything, to finally let the truth breathe. But another part of me, the part that had protected this secret for so long, held me back. "It's complicated," I said gently. "I'm not a baby to finally let the truth breathe." But another part of me, the part that had protected this secret for so long, held me back. "It's for so long held me back." "It's complicated," I said gently. "I'm not a baby," she insisted. "I can understand." I smiled faintly, even though she couldn't see it. "Okay, now you can," I said. "But some stories, Kated," I said gently. "I'm not a baby," she insisted. "I can understand." I smiled faintly, even though she couldn't see it. "I know you can," I said. "But some stories take time." There was a small sigh on the other end. "Okay," she said. Then after a moment she added, "I believe you, Grandma." The words hit me harder than I expected, more than Ethan's accusations, more than the silence of the past 12 years, because belief is fragile, and she was giving hers to me freely. "Thank you," I whispered. "I told Dad he was wrong," she said. My heart skipped. "What did he say?" "He told me to stay out of it," she replied. "But I don't think he's sure anymore." I leaned back in my chair, absorbing that. Not sure. For Ethan, that was a beginning, a crack in his certainty, a chance. "Lily," I said softly. Whatever happens, I want you to remember something. What I love you. Always. I know, she said. I love you too. We stayed on the phone a little longer, talking about small things. School, her friends, the cake she didn't get to enjoy. Normal things, safe things. But when we finally hung up, the silence returned. Only now it felt different. Not empty, not suffocating, but waiting for something to change. I looked at the wooden box again, at the medals, at the folded paper beside them, and for the first time, I felt it clearly. The truth wasn't just coming. It was already here, and sooner or later, I was going to have to open that paper. The day stretched on, longer than it should have. There's a particular kind of silence that follows humiliation. One that doesn't just sit in the room, but follows you, settles into your bones, and lingers no matter how much time passes. By mid-afternoon, I had tried everything to escape it. I cleaned the kitchen twice, rearranged drawers that didn't need rearranging, even stepped outside and walked the length of my quiet street, hoping fresh air might clear the heaviness from my chest. It didn't, because no matter where I went, Ethan's voice followed. You probably bought them online. I stopped at the end of the sidewalk, gripping the strap of my coat a little tighter. Across the street, Mrs. Keller was watering her flowers, humming softly to herself. Everything looked normal, peaceful, ordinary. And yet, my life no longer felt that way. I turned back toward the house, slower this time, deliberate, like each step was leading me towards something I could no longer avoid. When I stepped inside, the stillness greeted me again, but this time, it felt expectant, waiting. For me. I walked straight into the living room. The wooden box was exactly where I had left it. Open, exposed, no longer hidden behind polite silence or carefully crafted lies, and beside it, the folded paper. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a line, a point of no return. Because once I opened it, I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't go back to being the quiet widow in Ohio, the woman who smiled politely and let people believe whatever version of her made them comfortable. No, if I opened that paper, I couldn't go back to being the quiet widow in Ohio, the woman who smiled politely and let people believe whatever version of her made them comfortable. No, if I opened that paper, everything would change. I slowly sat down, my hands resting on my knees as if I needed to ground myself before doing something irreversible. Not yet, I whispered, but the words sounded weaker now, less certain, because the truth didn't care about timing, and deep down, I knew I was running out of time to control how it came out. The phone rang. The sound startled me so much, I nearly dropped the box. I stared at it for a moment, my heart pounding harder than it should have. Unknown number. For a brief second, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but something instinctive told me not to. I picked it up. Hello? There was a pause on the other end. Then a voice calm, measured, unmistakably authoritative. May I speak with Jacob Whitman? My breath caught. This is she. Another pause. Slightly shorter this time. Ms. Whitman, my name is Colonel David Mercer. I'm calling on behalf of the Department of Defense. The room seemed to tilt. For a moment I didn't speak, didn't breathe, didn't move. I think you may have the wrong number, I said finally, my voice quieter than I intended. We do not, he replied. There was no hesitation in his tone, no uncertainty, only certainty, the kind that makes your heart beat faster for reasons you don't fully understand. I tightened my grip on the phone. What is this about? Another pause, longer this time, as if he were choosing his words carefully. As a matter of protocol, he said, I can't discuss details over the phone, but we would like to arrange a meeting with you as soon as possible. My stomach dropped. A meeting? After all these years? Why, I asked, unable to hide the edge in my voice. There was a shift on the line. Not hesitation, something else. Respect. Because he said slowly, there are matters concerning your service that require formal acknowledgement. My fingers tightened. Service. He said it so simply, so directly, as if it were something real, something documented, something undeniable. That's not possible, I said almost instinctively. There must be some mistake. I was never. You were, he interrupted gently. Not forcefully, not accusingly, just firmly. And that firmness shook something loose inside me. I looked down at the medals in the box, at the paper beside them, at the life I had spent years keeping separate from the one I was living now. Ms. Whitman, Colonel Mercer continued. I understand this may come as a surprise, but we have recently reviewed archival records that were previously restricted. Restricted. The word echoed in my mind. Not lost, not erased, restricted, which meant they had always been there, hidden, waiting. For how long, I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Decades, he said. The room felt suddenly too small, too quiet, too full of everything I had tried to forget. And now I pressed. Now he said we believe an error was made, one that needs to be corrected, an error. I let out a hollow laugh before I could stop myself. You mean the part where I disappeared? I asked. Or the part where no one was supposed to know I existed? Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Honest. Ms. Whitman, he said carefully, we would prefer to discuss this in person. Of course they would, because things like this were never meant to be simple. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling again. This was it. The moment I had always known might come, but never truly believed would. Not like this. Not after so long, when I asked. As soon as you're able, he replied. We can arrange transportation if necessary. I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. No, I said. I'll come. There was a brief pause then. Thank you. He gave me the details. Washington, D.C., a building I knew better than I ever admitted, a time, a name. Then the call ended, just like that, as if he had simply confirmed a routine appointment, as if he hadn't just cracked open a past I had spent my entire life trying to contain. I lowered the phone slowly, placing it on the table beside the box. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was something else, something sharper, something rising. I looked down at the folded paper. For a long moment, I didn't move. Then slowly, I reached for it. If they were reopening the past, then I didn't have the luxury of ignoring it anymore. My fingers brushed against the edge. I unfolded it carefully, the paper creasing softly as it opened. The words inside were faded, but still there, still clear enough to read. And as my eyes scanned the first line, my breath caught, because even after all these years, seeing it written out like that still felt unreal, still felt dangerous, still felt like something that could destroy everything if it ever came to light. I sat there, staring at it, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. Then, quietly, I whispered the only truth I could no longer deny. They found me. And for the first time since that night, I realized something that made my heart beat just a little faster. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of the truth. I didn't pack much. Just a small suitcase, a few changes of clothes, and the wooden box. For a long time, I stood in my bedroom, staring at it sitting on the edge of the bed. I hadn't decided to bring it at first. In fact, part of me had thought about leaving it behind, locking it away like I had always done, pretending this trip was just another errand, another quiet obligation. But that would have been a lie. And something inside me, something that had been silent for years, was no longer willing to lie. So I picked it up. Carefully, respectfully, as if I were carrying something fragile. Not the medals, but the truth attached to them. The drive to Washington, D.C. felt longer than it should have. Miles stretched out in front of me, but my mind kept drifting backward instead of forward. Every road sign I passed felt like a marker, not of distance, but of time. Years, decades, memories I had locked away were beginning to stir whether I wanted them to or not. By the time the city skyline appeared in the distance, my hands were gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. Washington had always felt different, even back then, especially back then. There's something about that city, something quiet and powerful, that reminds you how small you really are and how big the decisions made there can become. I parked where they told me to, a secure lot, guarded, controlled, the kind of place you don't accidentally end up in. As I stepped out of the car, the air felt heavier. Not physically, but emotionally, like stepping onto ground that remembered you even if you wished it didn't. I adjusted my coat, picked up the box, and walked toward the entrance. The guards didn't smile. They checked my ID, confirmed my name, and exchanged a look that lingered just a second too long. Recognition, not of me as a person, but of the name. "Ms. Whitman," one of them said, his voice slightly more formal now. "They're expecting you." Of course they were. I followed the directions they gave me, moving through hallways that felt both unfamiliar and strangely familiar at the same time. The kind of place where every step echoes just a little too loudly. The kind of place where secrets don't disappear. They get buried. Finally, I reached the door. It was plain, unremarkable. No sign, no title, just a door. But I knew better. I paused, my hand hovering just inches from the handle. This was it. The line I had been standing at for years without realizing how close I was to crossing it. I exhaled slowly. Then I knocked. "Come in." The voice was deep, steady. I opened the door. The room was larger than I expected, but not extravagant. Clean, organized, purposeful. And behind the desk, he stood. General Harrison Cole, older than I remembered men like him being, but not weaker. His posture was straight, his eyes sharp, his presence undeniable. He studied me for a moment, not casually, not politely, but carefully, as if comparing the woman standing in front of him to something he had only seen on paper. "Jacob Whitman," he said. Not a question, a confirmation. I nodded. "That's me." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then slowly he stepped around the desk. "I appreciate you coming," he said. His voice had changed slightly, softer. Not less authoritative, but more human. "I didn't have much of a choice," I replied. A faint flicker of something crossed his expression. Understanding, maybe. "Fair enough," he said. He gestured toward a chair. "Please." I sat down, placing the wooden box carefully on my lap. My hands rested on it instinctively, as if shielding it or grounding myself. His eyes flicked toward it. Of course they did. "They've been kept well," he said. I didn't respond immediately. Yes, I said finally. They have. Silence settled between us. Not awkward, not uncomfortable, but heavy, meaningful. He returned to his desk, but he didn't sit right away. Instead, he reached for a folder, thick worn at the edges. He placed it on the desk between us. Then slowly he opened it. I didn't need to see inside to know what it contained. I could feel it. The past, documented, organized, finally acknowledged. For many years, he began this file was classified under a level that prevented review, even internally. I let out a quiet breath. I figured. He glanced up at me. You didn't question it. I met his gaze. What would have been the point, I asked. I was told to forget. His jaw tightened slightly. And you did? I shook my head. No, I said. I learned how to live with it. That answer seemed to stay with him for a moment. Then he nodded. That makes sense. He turned a page. There was a mission, he said. Unofficial. Unrecorded in standard channels. Yes. You were present. Yes. You assumed responsibilities outside your assigned role. I didn't answer that right away, because the way he said it made it sound simple, clean, controlled. It hadn't been. It wasn't supposed to happen that way, I said quietly. His eyes met mine again. No, he agreed. It wasn't. Another page turned. And yet, it did. Silence again. But this time, it felt closer. More personal. Do you remember the date, he asked? I almost laughed. Do you? I countered. He didn't. Of course he didn't. But I did. Because some moments don't fade. They imprint. August 14th, I said, just before sunrise. His eyes sharpened. You remember that precisely. I remember everything precisely. The room seemed to shift slightly after that, the air tightening, the distance between us shrinking. Then you remember what happened, he said. It wasn't a question. And for the first time since I walked into that room, I felt it. Not fear, not shame, but something deeper. Something I had buried under years of silence. The truth. I looked down at the wooden box in my lap. Then slowly, I opened it. The metals caught the light as the lid lifted. For a moment, neither of us spoke. They said I wasn't supposed to be there. I began quietly. His voice was low. They were wrong. I lifted one of the metals, holding it between my fingers. It wasn't my mission, I continued. It wasn't my rank. It wasn't even my place. I looked up at him. But I was there. The room fell silent again. Not waiting, not questioning, just listening. And for the first time in decades, I was ready to stop holding it back. Because the story they had written in that file wasn't the whole truth, not even close. General Cole didn't interrupt me. He didn't take notes. He didn't even move. He just listened. And that more than anything made it harder to speak. Because for years, no one had listened. Not really. They weren't supposed to send me. I said, my voice steady but low. I wasn't military. Not officially. I was support staff. Logistics. Paperwork. The kind of role people forget exists until something goes wrong. He nodded once. But something did go wrong, he said. I let out a slow breath. Yes. The word felt heavier than it should have, because it wasn't just something. It was everything. I closed my eyes for a moment, and when I opened them again, I wasn't in that room anymore. Not really. I was back there. August 14th, just before sunrise. The air had been thick, dry tents filled with the kind of silence that isn't peaceful, but waiting for something to break. We were stationed at a temporary forward base, not official, not permanent, the kind of place that doesn't show up on maps. There had been chatter on the radios all night, confused reports, fragments of information that didn't line up. Something was off. Everyone knew it, but no one could prove it yet. They said it was a routine escort mission. I continued, my eyes fixed somewhere beyond the walls of the office. A small unit, in and out. Nothing unusual. General Cole leaned slightly forward. But it wasn't, he said. No, I replied. It wasn't. I could still see it. The way the men had prepared, focused, but relaxed. Because they trusted the information they'd been given. Because they believed someone had done their job correctly, and that someone hadn't. There was a gap, I said slowly. In the intel. Small enough to overlook, big enough to get people killed. He didn't interrupt. He already knew this part. Or at least the version written in the file. But I saw it, I said. My fingers tightened slightly around the metal I was still holding. I wasn't supposed to, I added. It wasn't my responsibility, but I saw it anyway. What kind of gap? He asked. I met his eyes. The kind that puts a unit exactly where the enemy expects them. Silence. Heavy. Understanding. They were walking into an ambush, I said. The words hung in the air like something alive. General Cole exhaled slowly. And you reported it? I shook my head. No. His brow furrowed slightly. No, there wasn't time, I said. The convoy had already left. The radios were jammed. And the officer in charge? I hesitated, because even now saying it felt dangerous. He dismissed it. I finished. Cole's expression hardened slightly. On what grounds? I let out a quiet, humorless breath. On the grounds that I wasn't a soldier. The room fell still again, but this time there was something else in it. Anger. Not mine. His. He said I didn't understand the situation. I continued, that I was overstepping, that I should go back to doing what I was assigned to do. I paused, and for a moment, I almost did. That part always hurt the most, because it meant there had been a choice. A moment where I could have walked away, stayed safe, stayed invisible. But I hadn't. I couldn't ignore it, I said quietly. I knew what would happen if I did. General Cole nodded slowly. So what did you do? I looked down at the metal in my hand, then back at him. I followed them. The words felt simple, but the weight behind them was anything but. You weren't authorized, he said. No, you weren't equipped. No, you weren't trained for combat. I held his gaze. Not officially, I said. That earned the smallest shift in his expression. Recognition? Interest. Explain that, he said. I leaned back slightly, the chair creaking under me. Working in logistics doesn't mean you don't see things, I said. You hear conversations. You observe patterns. You learn how things work, even if no one teaches you directly. I paused, and sometimes you learn more than you're supposed to. The truth was, I had spent years watching, listening, absorbing, because when you're overlooked, people stop being careful around you. They stop filtering what they say. They stop noticing what you understand. And I had used that, quietly, carefully, until the day I needed it. I took a vehicle, I continued, not assigned to me, not logged, just there. And you went after them? He said. Yes, alone, carefully, until the day I needed it. I took a vehicle, I continued, not assigned to me, not logged, just there. And you went after them, he said. Yes. Alone. Yes. The word echoed louder than the others. Because that was the part no one ever really understood. What it means to choose to walk into danger alone. I caught up just before sunrise, I said. They had already reached the canyon pass. Cole's jaw tightened. He knew what that meant. A choke point. Limited visibility. Perfect for an ambush. They were walking straight into it, I said. Just like I thought. What did you do? He asked. This time, I hesitated longer, because this was where the story changed, where it stopped being something I witnessed and became something I caused. I made a decision, I said slowly. The room seemed to lean in, waiting. What kind of decision, he pressed. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time since I entered that office, I saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Not authority, not distance, but something closer to respect. I broke protocol, I said. A beat. I gave orders. Silence. Absolute. Unbroken. Because that was the moment everything shifted. Not just for them, but for me. You weren't in command, he said quietly. No, and yet you took command. Yes. Why? I swallowed, because the answer was simple and impossible at the same time, because no one else would, I said. The truth settled into the room like something undeniable. Heavy. Real. Irreversible. I leaned forward slightly, my hands resting on the box again. They didn't trust me at first, I continued. Why would they? I wasn't supposed to be there. I didn't have rank. I didn't have authority. I paused. But I had something else. What he asked. I was right. The words came out sharper than I expected. Not defensive. Not proud. Just factual. They didn't have time to argue, I said. Once I pointed it out, once they saw it, they had to make a choice. And they listened, Cole said. Yes, and that saved them. I didn't answer immediately, because that part wasn't that simple. It changed what happened next, I said carefully. His eyes narrowed slightly. Meaning? I took a slow breath, because this was where the story stopped being clean, stopped being heroic, and became something else entirely. Meaning, I said quietly, they didn't walk into the ambush. I paused. They walked into something worse. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was sharp, tense, waiting. And for the first time since I started speaking, General Cole didn't look like he already knew what came next. General Cole didn't speak right away. For the first time since I had entered that room, he looked uncertain. Not about me, but about what he thought he knew. What do you mean worse? He asked finally. His voice was quieter now, less controlled. Because somewhere between the lines I had already crossed, he had realized something important. The version in the file was incomplete. I exhaled slowly, my eyes drifting back to the metal in my hand. They expected an ambush, I said. That's what the intel gap suggested. A coordinated attack. Gunfire. Maybe explosives. I paused. That's what we prepared for. And, he pressed. I shook my head slightly. That's not what we found. The memory came back sharper now, clearer, like a wound reopening. The canyon was too quiet, I said. No movement, no signal, no heat signatures where there should have been. Cole leaned forward slightly. A decoy, he murmured. Yes, I said, But not just a decoy, I swallowed. It was bait. The words settled between us like something dangerous. Bait for what he asked. I looked at him. For us. Silence. Then explain. I closed my eyes for just a second, and when I opened them again, I was there. Right in the middle of it. The moment we slowed the convoy, I said everything changed. I could still hear it, the sound. Not gunfire, not explosions. Something else. A low, distant hum. Barely noticeable at first. But wrong. Completely wrong. It started with interference. I continued. Our radios weren't just jammed, they were being manipulated, signals looping, commands repeating that no one had given. Cole's brow furrowed. That's not standard insurgent capability. I know, I said, and yet it was happening. I leaned forward slightly, my voice tightening. Vehicles began stalling, systems flickering, navigation readings changing without input. He stared at me. Electronic warfare. Yes, I said. But not the kind we were trained for. Because this wasn't chaos. It was controlled, precise, deliberate. They weren't trying to destroy us immediately, I said. They were isolating us. I paused, separating us. And then, he asked. I hesitated. Because this was where it crossed the line, from dangerous to something else entirely. They started taking people, I said quietly. The room went still. What? Cole said, his voice sharper now. Not all at once, I explained. One vehicle at a time. Systems would go dark, visibility would drop, and when it came back, I swallowed. They were gone. Gone how? He pressed. No signs of struggle, I said. No bodies, no blood, just empty seats. His expression hardened. That doesn't make sense, I know. Were they extracted, captured? I shook my head slowly. That's what we thought at first, but nothing lined up, I said. No tracks, no movement, no heat signatures leaving the area. I leaned back slightly, the weight of the memory pressing harder now. It was like they just disappeared. The silence that followed was heavier than anything before. Because now, this wasn't just a failed mission. It was something else. Something that didn't fit into the categories they understood. And you were in command, he said. I nodded once. Then you made a call. Yes. What kind of call? I closed my eyes briefly. Because this was the moment everything changed. The moment I stopped reacting and started deciding. I ordered a full withdrawal. I said. Cole frowned. That contradicts the report. Of course it did. Because that's not what happened, I said quietly. He stared at me. Explain. I met his gaze. I gave the order I repeated, but we didn't leave. Why not? Because by the time I gave it, I paused. We were already surrounded. The word hung in the air like a warning. How many, he asked. I don't know, I said. We couldn't see them cull early. Just movement, shapes, shadows. We were already surrounded. The word hung in the air like a warning. How many, he asked. I don't know, I said. We couldn't see them clearly. Just movement, shapes, shadows. That's not a number, Ms. Whitman. I know, I said, my voice tightening slightly, because they weren't moving like people. Silence again. But this time, there was disbelief in it. You're telling me, I'm telling you what I saw. I cut in sharper than I intended. He stopped, watched me, measured the weight behind my words. Then, more carefully, he asked, what did they do? I looked down at the metal again, at the reflection of light across its surface. They didn't attack the way we expected, I said. No direct fire, no charges, no shouting. I paused. They just closed in, slowly, methodically, like they knew exactly where we were, exactly what we were thinking, exactly how long we had left. "And your unit?" he asked. Panicked, I said honestly. At first, because nothing made sense. I exhaled slowly. But panic doesn't last long in a situation like that. "What replaces it?" he asked. I looked at him. Focus. Because when you realize fear won't save you, you stop wasting time on it. And then he pressed. I leaned forward slightly, my voice lowering. Then I made the decision that changed everything. The room felt tighter now, more contained, as if the walls themselves were listening. "What decision?" he asked. I held his gaze. I split the unit. His eyes narrowed. "That's a risk?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because staying together was getting us killed," I said. "Whatever was out there, it was tracking us as a group, predicting our movements, anticipating our reactions." I paused, but smaller groups were harder to track. He nodded slowly. "That makes sense." "It wasn't just strategy," I added quietly. "It was survival. And did it work?" I didn't answer right away, because that question wasn't simple. "Some of them got out," I said. "Some," he repeated. I nodded. "Yes, and the others," I looked down, at my hands, at the metal, at the past that had never really left me. "They didn't make it," I said. The words came out softer than anything else I had said so far. Not because I didn't want him to hear them, but because I still felt them, after all these years. "How many?" he asked quietly. I shook my head. "I don't know the exact number," I admitted, because after a certain point, I stopped, because saying it out loud still felt unreal. After a certain point, what he pressed. I looked up at him again, and this time, there was no hesitation. No one was keeping count anymore. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, unavoidable. Because now, we weren't talking about a mission. We weren't talking about protocol. We weren't talking about medals. We were talking about something far more complicated, far more human. Loss, responsibility, and the kind of decisions that stay with you long after the moment has passed. General Cole leaned back slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. For years, he said this was recorded as a failed operation with unclear variables. I gave a faint, tired smile. "That's one way to describe it." But now he continued, "You're telling me it was something else entirely." I nodded. "Yes, and that you were the one who made the decisions that determined who lived and who didn't." The words hung in the air, sharp, direct, unforgiving. I didn't look away. "Yes," I said, because that was the truth. And no matter how many years passed, it didn't get lighter. It didn't get easier. It just stayed. General Cole didn't speak for a long time. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled in front of him, eyes fixed on me, but not in the way he had before. Not analytical, not distant. Now he was trying to understand, and that was far more dangerous. "Your report," he said slowly, "never included any of that." "Of course it didn't." "It wasn't my report," I replied. A small shift in his posture. "Clarify that." I let out a breath that felt like it had been waiting years to escape. "I gave a verbal account," I said. immediately after extraction. And then I was told to stop talking. The room went still again, not shocked, not surprised, just confirming something he had already begun to suspect. By whom, he asked. I hesitated, because names still carried weight. Even now. Captain Daniel Reeves, I said, finally. Cole's eyes flickered. Recognition. Yes, he said, quietly. He's mentioned in the file. Of course he was. But not the way he should have been. He was the commanding officer, Cole continued. The one credited with stabilizing the situation. I gave a faint, tired smile. Is that what it says? Cole didn't answer. Because now, but not the way he should have been. He was the commanding officer, Cole continued. The one credited with stabilizing the situation. I gave a faint, tired smile. Is that what it says? Cole didn't answer. Because now, he was starting to see the cracks. He wasn't there, I said. That landed harder than anything else I had said so far. Cole's head lifted slightly. What? He never made it to the canyon, I clarified. His vehicle turned back before the pass. That contradicts. I know what it contradicts. I cut in my voice, steady but firm. Silence. Then, why would the record state otherwise? He asked. I held his gaze. Because someone had to be in command, I said. And it couldn't be you, he finished. Exactly. The truth settled between us like something long buried finally being uncovered. I wasn't supposed to exist in that role, I said. Not on paper. Not in history. Cole looked down at the file, flipping through a few pages quickly. His movements were sharper now, more urgent. And the survivors, he asked, they would have known. Yes, and they said nothing I didn't answer immediately, because this part was complicated. They said what they were told to say, I said finally, and what were they told, he pressed. That Captain Reeves regained control of the situation, I said. That he issued the orders, that he led the withdrawal. Cole's jaw tightened. And you, I wasn't mentioned. A quiet breath escaped him. Not even once I shook my head. No. He leaned back again, the weight of that settling in. For decades, he said slowly, his narrative has stood unchallenged. A quiet breath escaped him. Not even once I shook my head. No. He leaned back again, the weight of that settling in. For decades, he said slowly, this narrative has stood unchallenged. Yes, and you never came forward. It wasn't an accusation, not quite, but it was close enough. I couldn't, I said. Why not? Because of fear, because of orders, because of everything that came after, because they made it clear. I said that if I did, the consequences wouldn't just be mine. Cole's eyes sharpened. Explain. I swallowed, because this was the part that had kept me silent the longest. They said the mission was to find the missing girl the longest. They said the mission didn't officially exist, I said. That any attempt to bring it into the light would create complications. Complications, he repeated. I gave a small, humorless laugh. That's a polite word for it. What kind of complications? I leaned forward slightly, my voice lowering. The kind that ruin lives, I said. His gaze didn't waver. Yours, mine, I said, and my family's. That landed, harder than anything else. They knew about your family, he asked. Yes, and they used that. They didn't have to threaten directly, I said. It was implied. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't just heavy. It was angry. Cole closed the file slowly. "Who made that decision?" he asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I was never given a name, just instructions. And you followed them." "Yes, for all these years." "Yes." The word came out softer this time, because now there was no strength in it, only truth. "And the medals," he asked. "They were given quietly," I said. "No ceremony, no record. Just handed to me." "By Reeves," I nodded. "Yes." Cole's eyes darkened slightly, and he kept the credit. "Yes, and you kept the silence." I nodded again. "Yes." The room felt smaller now, closer, as if everything we were saying was narrowing the space between past and present. "And your husband?" he asked after a moment. Did he know that question hit differently? Softer, more personal? "Yes," I said. "All of it." "Not at first," I admitted, "but eventually, yes." And he agreed to the arrangement. I looked down at the box in my lap. "At first, he didn't understand it," I said, "but he saw what it meant. What could happen if the truth came out the wrong way?" I paused. "He chose to protect us." Cole nodded slowly. "And your son?" The question lingered, heavy, painful. "No," I said quietly. "Ethan never knew." "Why not?" I closed my eyes briefly. "Because the answer wasn't simple. Because I wanted him to have a normal life," I said. "A father he could be proud of. A story that made sense, and the truth didn't." "No." The word echoed. Clear. Unavoidable. And now Cole asked. I opened my eyes again, meeting his gaze. "Now he thinks I'm a liar?" The silence that followed was different. Not just heavy, but human. Because now this wasn't just about records, or missions, or history. It was about family, about what we choose to protect and what those choices cost. Cole leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the desk. "The review that led to this meeting," he said carefully, "was triggered by inconsistencies in multiple archived reports." I listened. Discrepancies in timing, command structure, survivor testimonies that didn't fully align. I nodded. "They wouldn't." "No." He agreed. "They wouldn't." He paused, then added, "But what finally raised concern was a pattern." A pattern I repeated. "Yes." He tapped the file lightly. "Your name appeared." I felt my chest tighten in restricted annotations, he said. Redacted sections, cross-references that shouldn't have existed unless someone was trying to bury something. I let was trying to bury something. I let out a slow breath. They were... Cole studied me. "For years, those notes were ignored," he continued. "Dismissed as clerical errors, incomplete records. But now to slow breath. They were." Cole studied me. "For years, those notes were ignored," he continued. "Dismissed as clerical errors, incomplete records. But now, he said, someone decided to look closer." Silence. Then, "And they found you." I nodded. "Yes." The truth sat between us. Clear, unavoidable. "They didn't just find me," I said quietly. "They found what was missing." Cole didn't respond immediately, but I could see it in his eyes. He understood. Not everything, not yet, but enough. "And that's why I'm here," I added. "Yes," he said. "And the apology." He hesitated, just for a moment. Then, "That's part of it," Part of it. I leaned back slightly, studying him. And the rest? I asked. He held my gaze. The rest is making it right. The words sounded strong, confident. But I had lived long enough to know something important. Making something right doesn't erase what was wrong. I looked down at the medals again, at the life they represented, at the truth they carried, then back at him. And what does right look like to you? General, I asked. He didn't answer immediately, because now we were standing at a different kind of line. Not between truth and silence, but between past and consequences. General Cole held my gaze for a long moment before answering. And in that moment, I understood something important. This wasn't just about paperwork anymore. It wasn't just about correcting a file or issuing a formal apology. This was about unraveling something that had been deliberately hidden. Making it right, he said slowly, means restoring the truth to the official record. I let out a quiet breath. That's all I asked. It came out softer than I intended, but sharper too. Because after everything, after decades of silence, after the cost of it all didn't feel like enough. He didn't take offense. If anything, he seemed to expect the question. No, he said, that's not all. Silence stretched between us again, but now it felt like something was shifting, like we were finally moving towards something real. There are several steps involved, he continued. First, your role in the mission would be formally recognized, not just internally, but publicly. Publicly. The word echoed louder than it should have. For years, I had lived in the shadows of my own story. Now they wanted to put it in the light. You understand what that means? He added. I nodded slowly. Yes, it meant exposure, questions, attention, and consequences I couldn't fully predict. Second, he said the commendations you received unofficially would be validated and reissued through proper channels. I glanced down at the medals in the box. They're already real, I said quietly. Yes, he replied. But now they would be recognized as such. Recognized. The difference between truth and acknowledged truth. And third, I asked. He paused, just long enough for me to know it mattered. There would be an official statement, he said, addressing the discrepancy in command attribution. My eyes lifted to meet his. You mean Captain Reeves? Yes. And what happens to him? I asked. Cole's expression didn't change much, but something in his eyes hardened slightly. That depends, he said, on what the full review concludes. I held his gaze. He's been living with that credit for decades, I said, building a reputation on it. I'm aware. And now was the question, wasn't it? Because truth doesn't just correct itself quietly. It shifts things, breaks things, exposes this hifts things, breaks things, exposes the ings people would rather keep hidden. If the evidence supports your account, Cole said carefully, then the record will be amended accordingly. Amended, I repeated, such a small word, for something so big, and if it doesn't, Ing's people would rather keep hidden. If the evidence supports your account, Cole said carefully, then the record will be amended accordingly. Amended, I repeated. Such a small word, for something so big, and if it doesn't, I asked. His eyes didn't waver. Then we continue the investigation. I studied him for a moment, trying to read between the lines, trying to understand what he wasn't saying. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just a courtesy meeting. This was a turning point. And what about the people who didn't make it? I asked quietly. The question shifted the room again. Because now, We weren't talking about recognition. We were talking about loss. Cole exhaled slowly. Their families were given official reports, he said, based on the information available at the time, which wasn't the truth. No, he admitted. Silence. Then, if this is reopened, I said, they'll find out. Yes, and what happens when they realize the story they've lived with for decades wasn't real? He didn't answer immediately, because there isn't a clean answer to that. There will be support, he said finally. Counseling, outreach. I gave a faint shake of my head. That doesn't fix it. No, he said quietly. It doesn't. The honesty in that mattered more than anything else he could have said. Because some things don't get fixed. They just get acknowledged. I leaned back slightly, letting the weight of it settle. For years, I said I thought silence was the safer choice. Cole watched me carefully. For you, he asked. For everyone, I said. And now I looked down at the medals again, at the life they represented, at the cost they carried. Now I'm not so sure. The room felt quieter after that. Not empty, but reflective, as if even the walls were considering the weight of what had been said. Ms. Whitman Cole said after a moment, "There's one more thing." I looked up. What is it? He reached into the folder again, pulling out a separate document. This one looked newer, cleaner, untouched by time. He placed it on the desk and turned it slightly toward me. You're not the only one who's been identified in the review, he said. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? There were others, he continued. Individuals whose roles were minimized or omitted entirely. I stared at the paper. Names, redacted in places, highlighted in others. But one name wasn't redacted. It was clear, visible, unavoidable. My breath caught. No, I whispered. Cole watched my reaction carefully. You recognize it, he said. I didn't answer right away. Because the name brought everything rushing back. Not the mission, not the chaos, but something else, something more personal. Sergeant Michael Alvarez. I said finally. Cole nodded. He survived the mission. I know, I said. My voice felt different now. Softer, more distant. He was in one of the split units, I added. He got out because I stopped, because the memory hit harder than I expected. Because of you? Cole finished. I shook my head slightly. No, I said. Because of a choice I made. A choice that saved him, Cole said. And others. I added quietly. He studied me. According to the records, Sergeant Alvarez has spent years trying to correct the official account. That made my head lift. What? He submitted multiple statements, Cole said, all of which were dismissed or buried due to lack of supporting documentation. My chest tightened. He tried, I murmured. Yes, and no one listened. No. The word felt heavier than anything else in the room, because now this wasn't just my silence. It was someone else's attempt to break it, and failing. Where is he now? I asked. Cole glanced down at the document. Retired. Because now this wasn't just my silence. It was someone else's attempt to break it, and failing. Where is he now? I asked. Cole glanced down at the document. Retired, he said. Lives in New Mexico. Alive. After all these years. Alive. He never stopped, Cole added, even after his submissions were rejected. I closed my eyes briefly, because that meant something, more than I could put into words. He remembered, I said. Yes, and he tried to tell the truth. Yes. I opened my eyes again, and for the first time since this meeting began, something shifted inside me. Not fear, not hesitation, but something stronger. Resolve. I want to speak with him, I said. Cole nodded once. That can be arranged. I looked down at the names again, at the pieces of a story that had never fully come together. Until now. This isn't just about me, I said quietly. I know, he replied. And if we're going to do this? I paused, then finished. We do it completely. Cole held my gaze, then nodded. Completely, he agreed. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. The truth wasn't just coming back. It was bringing everything with it. I didn't leave Washington right away. Even after the meeting ended, even after General Cole stood and offered a formal handshake, firm, respectful, different from when I had first arrived, I found myself sitting in my car, hands resting on the steering wheel, unable to turn the key. Because everything had shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. For years, my life had been built on silence, on control, on keeping things contained. And now, that control was slipping. Not because I had lost it, but because I had chosen to let go. I glanced at the passenger seat. The wooden box sat there quiet as ever, unchanged. And yet everything about it felt different now. Because it wasn't just mine anymore. It was evidence, proof, a piece of something much larger than I had allowed myself to acknowledge. My phone buzzed. The sound cut through the stillness, sharp and unexpected. For a brief second, my heart jumped. Then I looked at the screen. Ethan. My chest tightened instantly. I stared at his name longer than I should have, because I already knew what this conversation would carry. Tension, distance, things left unsaid. I answered. Hello? There was no greeting on the other end. Just silence. Then, where are you? His voice wasn't angry this time. It was something else. Controlled. Too controlled. I'm out of town, I said carefully. Out of town, he repeated. You just left, no explanation. No call. I closed my eyes briefly. I needed to take care of something. What kind of something, Mom, he pressed. The word Mom felt heavier than it used to. Not warm, not soft, just distant. I'll explain when I get back, I said. No, he snapped. You won't. I tightened my grip on the phone. Ethan. You lied to me, he cut in, right to my face. The words hit harder than I expected, because they weren't wrong. Not entirely. I didn't lie, I said quietly. I just didn't tell you everything. That's the same thing. He shot back. Silence stretched between us. And for the first time since he was a child, I didn't know how to bridge it. You really expect me to believe those medals are real? He continued. After everything you've said, I looked at the box again, at the weight of the truth sitting just inches away. Yes, I said. The word came out steady, certain, more certain than anything I had said to him before. There was a pause, a long one, as if he hadn't expected that answer. You're serious, he said finally. I am. Another silence. Different this time. Less confrontational, more unsettled. Then prove it. As if he hadn't expected that answer. You're serious, he said finally. I am. Another silence. Different this time. Less confront, different this time. Less confrontational, more unsettled. Then prove it, he said. The challenge hung in the air. Sharp, clear, unavoidable. I could have avoided it. Deflected, delayed. But something inside, meational, more unsettled. Then prove it, he said. The challenge hung in the air. Sharp, clear, unavoidable. I could have avoided it. Deflected, delayed. But something inside me wouldn't let me. I'm working on that, I said. What does that mean? It means the truth is coming out, I said. Officially. A breath on the other end. Then, officially, he repeated. Yes. You expect me to just wait for that? He asked. No, I said. Then what? I took a slow breath. Because this was the moment. The line. The same kind of line I had stood at so many years ago. I expect you to trust me, I said. The silence that followed was immediate, heavy, painful. Because trust isn't something you can demand, especially not after years of hiding the truth. I don't know if I can, he said finally. His voice was quieter now. Not angry, just honest, and somehow that hurt more. I understand, I said, and I did, more than he knew. Then why now? He asked. Why tell me anything? Now I looked out through the windshield, at the unfamiliar city, at the life I had built so carefully. At first I didn't have a choice, I said, and now I do. And you're choosing this, he asked. Yes. Why? Because I'm tired of hiding. Because the truth matters. Because you deserve to know. All of those answers sat in my chest at once, but the one that came out was simpler. Because it's time, I said. He didn't respond immediately, and when he did, his voice was different again, less defensive, more uncertain. What if I don't like the truth? He asked. I closed my eyes. Because that was the real fear, wasn't it? Not that he would find out, but that he wouldn't understand. That doesn't change it, I said softly. Another long pause. Then, are you coming back? He asked. The question caught me off guard. Yes, I said. Of course I am. When? Soon. Soon isn't a time, Mom. I almost smiled. Even now he wanted specifics. Certainty. Something solid to hold on to. Tomorrow, I said. I'll be home tomorrow. Another silence. Then a quiet, okay, not forgiveness. Not acceptance. But not rejection either. Just a step. I'll see you then, I said. Yeah, he replied. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly, letting it rest in my lap. My hands were shaking again. But this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from something else. Something fragile. Hope. Because for the first time since that argument, the door wasn't completely closed. I turned the key in the ignition. The engine came to life. And as I pulled out of the parking lot, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to admit before. This wasn't just about correcting the past. It wasn't just about the medals or the mission. or the truth buried in those files. It was about what came after, the conversations, the consequences, the relationships that would either break or finally be rebuilt. And somewhere along the drive back, as the city faded behind me and the road stretched out ahead, one thought settled in my mind. I wasn't afraid of the truth anymore, but I was afraid of what it might cost me now. The house felt different when I walked back in, not because anything had changed physically. The same framed photos still lined the hallway. The same soft hum of the refrigerator filled the kitchen. The same worn couch sat exactly where it always had, holding the quiet imprint of years lived inside it. But something underneath all of that had shifted. The air felt heavier, like it was waiting. Ethan was already there. Standing in the living room, arms crossed, his posture stiff, not defensive, but guarded. Like someone bracing for something they weren't sure they wanted to hear. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other, and in that silence, I saw it. The boy I had raised, and the man he had become, both standing there at the same time. "You came back," he said finally. His voice was neutral, too neutral. "I said I would," I replied. He nodded once, slowly. Then his eyes shifted to the wooden box in my hand. Of course they did. That box had become the center of everything. "You brought them," he said. "Not a question, a statement." "Yes." Another silence, thicker this time, because now there was nowhere left to hide. "Are you going to show me?" he asked. The challenge was still there, but it wasn't sharp anymore. It was uncertain, careful. I walked into the room, slowly placing the box on the coffee table between us. For a moment, I didn't open it. I just rested my hand on the lid, because this wasn't just about proving something. It was about changing something between us. "You remember the day you asked me about these?" I said. He frowned slightly. "Yeah," he said. "You told me they were from your service. I told you they were from something I was part of," I corrected gently. He let out a short breath. "That's not how I remember it." "No," I said. "It isn't." I looked at him, really looked at him. "I should have told you more," I admitted. That caught him off guard. His arms loosened slightly. "You think he said, but there was less edge in it now?" "I thought I was protecting you," I continued, from what he asked. "The truth," I said simply. He let out a quiet, almost incredulous laugh. "You mean the truth you're suddenly ready to share now?" "Yes." "Why now?" he pressed again. The same question. But this time, it felt different. "Because now we were face to face. Because I don't want to lose you over something that isn't even a lie," I said. That landed, harder than I expected. He didn't respond right away. His eyes searched my face, as if trying to find something he could hold on to. "Then open it," he said finally. I nodded, and slowly I lifted the lid. The metals caught the light again, just like they had in General Cole's office. But here, they felt more exposed, more vulnerable, because this wasn't about authority or records. This was about belief. Ethan stepped closer. Not all the way, but enough. His eyes moved over the metals carefully, studying them, judging them. "You expect me to just accept this," he said. "No," I replied. "I expect you to listen." He hesitated, then nodded once. "Fine," he said. I took a slow breath. Because this was it. The moment I had been avoiding for years. I wasn't supposed to be in the military, I began. He frowned slightly. But you said I know what I said, I interrupted gently. But it's more complicated than that. I told him everything, not all at once, not rushed, but piece by piece. The base, the mission, the gap in the intel, the decision to follow, to step in, to give orders, to take responsibility. At first, he didn't say anything. He just listened, like General Cole had. But this was different. Because this wasn't just a story to him. This was his mother, and the version of me he had known was changing with every word. You're telling me, he said slowly after a long stretch of silence, that you led a unit? Yes, without rank. Yes, without authorization. Yes. He shook his head slightly. That doesn't make sense. I know, I said. Then how did anyone listen to you? I met his gaze. Because I was right. The same answer. But now it carried something more. Understanding. Pain. Truth. He looked away for a moment, running a hand through his hair, and all this time, he murmured. Yes, I said quietly. All this time, you just didn't say anything. He looked away for a moment, running a hand through his hair. And all this time, he murmured, Yes, I said quietly. All this time, you just didn't say anything. Yes. Why, he asked again. I stepped closer this time, closing the distance between us just a little. Because they told me not to, I said. He turned back to me. The people in charge, I said. The ones who controlled the records, the ones who decided what was official and what wasn't, and you just listened. I swallowed. Yes. He stared at me, and for a moment I saw it again. That flicker of disbelief, of frustration, of something close to anger. But it didn't explode this time. It stayed contained. Do you regret it? He asked. The question hit deeper than anything else he had said. Because it wasn't about facts or proof. It was about choices. I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was complicated. I regret what it cost, I said finally. What did it cost? He asked. I looked at him, at the distance that had grown between us, at the years of silence. You, I said. The word hung between us, heavy, real. His expression shifted, not dramatically, but enough. That's not fair, he said quietly. I know, I said, but it's true. Another silence, then, and now, he asked. Now I'm trying to fix it. How? He pressed. I took a breath, because this was the part he didn't know yet. There's an investigation, I said, an official review. His brow furrowed. Of what? Of the mission, I said. Of what really happened. And they're going to correct the record. He stared at me. For real? Yes. And you're part of that. Yes. Another long pause. Then, so all of this. He gestured vaguely toward the box the roomie is going to come out. Yes. To everyone? Yes. He let out a slow breath. That's a lot. It is, and you're okay with that. I hesitated, because the honest answer was no. I'm willing to be, I said. He studied me again. Longer there, I said. He studied me again, longer this time, as if trying to decide whether he believed me, or whether he wanted to. I don't know what to think, he admitted finally. That's okay, I said. I mean it, he continued. Is a lot to process. I know. But's time, as if trying to decide whether he believed me or whether he wanted to. I don't know what to think, he admitted finally. That's okay, I said. I mean it, he continued. This is a lot to process. I know. But he hesitated, and for the first time since this started, I saw something else in his eyes. Not doubt, not anger, but something softer. You don't look like you're lying, he said. It wasn't trust. Not yet. But it was something. A beginning. I'm not, I said. Another silence. But this time, it didn't feel like distance. It felt like space. Room for something to grow. He glanced down at the medals again, then back at me. So, what happens next? He asked. I exhaled slowly. Because now, we were both stepping into the same unknown. Next, I said, we find out the rest of the truth. And for the first time, he didn't argue. 3 days later, I was on a flight to New Mexico. Ethan sat beside me, not because I had asked him to, but because he had asked me. I want to hear it from someone else he had said the night before. Someone who was there. I hadn't argued. Because I understood. Trust doesn't come back just because you ask for it. It rebuilds itself slowly, piece by piece. And sometimes, it needs more than one voice. The desert stretched endlessly beneath us as the plane began its descent. Dry land, scattered houses, roads that looked like thin threads pulled across the earth. It felt far away from everything. Maybe that's why he had chosen to stay here. Sergeant Michael Alvarez. Or just Michael now. Retired. Alive. A man who had carried the same truth I had, but in a very different way. You nervous? Ethan asked suddenly. I turned slightly. A little, I admitted. Why, he asked. I considered the question. Because I don't know what he remembers, I said. Ethan frowned. You think he'll remember it differently? I don't know, I said honestly. Memory doesn't always stay the same, especially after something like that. He nodded slowly. That's fair. But there was something else in his voice, something I recognized. Doubt. Not sharp like before, but still there. Quiet. Waiting. The car ride from the airport was long. Neither of us spoke much. The address General Cole had given me led us to a modest house on the outskirts of a small town. Nothing remarkable about it. Just a single-story home, pale paint slightly faded by the sun, a truck parked in the driveway. Normal. Ordinary. And somehow, that made it feel even heavier. Because whatever lived inside that house wasn't ordinary. I knocked. Once. Then again. Footsteps approached slowly from inside. And when the door opened, time folded in on itself. Michael Alvarez looked older. Of course he did. So did I. But his eyes hadn't changed. Sharp. Aware. The kind of eyes that had seen something and never quite forgotten it. He stared at me for a moment, longer than a polite pause. Then Jacob Whitman, he said. Not a question. A statement. My breath caught. Yes. Another silence. Then he nodded once. I wondered if this day would come. His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it, something that had been waiting for years. May we come in? I asked. He stepped aside without hesitation. Of course. The house was simple inside, clean, organized, quiet. Ethan followed behind me, his movements careful, observant. Michael noticed him immediately. "This your son?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Ethan." Michael nodded toward him. "Good to meet you." Ethan returned the nod. "You too." There was a brief pause. Then Michael looked back at me, so he said, "They finally decided to tell the truth." I let out a slow breath. "They're starting to." He gave a small, almost amused smile. "Took them long enough." That made something tighten in my chest. "You knew?" I asked. "Of course I knew," he said. "I was there." He gestured toward the living room. "Sit." We did. Ethan sat across from him, leaning slightly forward, his attention fully locked in. Michael remained standing for a moment, studying me. Then he sat down as well. "You look the same," he said. I almost laughed. "I don't." "Not on the outside," he clarified. His gaze didn't waver. "But the way you hold yourself hasn't changed." That landed deeper than I expected. "I could say the same about you," I replied. He shrugged lightly. "Some things don't leave." "No, they didn't." Ethan shifted slightly in his seat. "I need to ask you something," he said. Michael turned his attention to him. "Go ahead." "Did she really lead that mission?" Ethan asked. No hesitation, no build-up, just the question. Direct, clear. Michael didn't even blink. "Yes." The word landed instantly, firm, certain. Ethan froze for a second, as if he hadn't expected it to come that easily. "That's it," he said. "Just yes." Michael leaned back slightly. "What else do you need?" he asked. "Details," Ethan said. "I need to understand." Michael glanced at me briefly, then back at Ethan. "You want to understand?" he said. "Yes." Michael nodded once, then listened carefully. The room seemed to settle, quiet, focused, because now, the story wasn't just mine anymore. It was his, too. "We were already in trouble before she showed up," Michael began. "We just didn't know it yet." Ethan didn't move, didn't interrupt. Good, because this part mattered. "A lot of us didn't take her seriously at first," Michael continued. "Why would we? She wasn't supposed to be there. No rank, no authority." He paused. "But she saw something we didn't." I felt Ethan glance at me. Just for a second, then back to Michael. What he asked. Michael leaned forward slightly. "The pattern," he said. "The setup. The fact that we were walking into something that didn't feel right." "That doesn't mean she should have been in charge," Ethan said. Michael's eyes sharpened slightly. "No," he said. "It doesn't." A beat. But when everything started falling apart, she was the only one who knew what to do. Silence. Ethan frowned. "What do you mean, I mean?" Michael said. "People panic when things stop making sense." He looked directly at Ethan now. "And when people panic, they look for someone who isn't?" A long pause. Then, "That was her." Ethan's expression shifted. Not fully convinced, but not dismissing it either. "What did she do?" he asked. Michael let out a slow breath. "She made decisions," he said. "Fast ones, hard ones. The kind that don't give you time to think about consequences." He glanced at me again, and she didn't hesitate. I looked down briefly. "Because that part was true. Too true. She split us up," Michael continued. "Most commanders wouldn't risk that. But staying together was getting us picked off." Ethan's brow furrowed. "Picked off how?" Michael's jaw tightened slightly. "You don't forget that part?" he said quietly. The room grew heavier, more serious, because now we were stepping closer to the center of it. The important thing, Michael's jaw tightened slightly. You don't forget that part, he said quietly. The room grew heavier, more serious, because now we were stepping closer to the center of it. The important thing, Michael said, shifting slightly, is that people made it out. Because of her? Ethan asked. Michael didn't hesitate. Yes. The certainty in his voice filled the room, left no space for doubt. And Captain Reeves, Ethan asked suddenly. That name changed everything. Michael's expression hardened instantly. He wasn't there, he said. The words came out sharper than anything else he had said. Ethan blinked. What? He turned back. Michael said, before the worst of it. And yet, Ethan hesitated, glancing at me. He got the credit. Michael gave a short, humorless laugh. Yeah, he said. He did. Silence settled over us again. But this time, it wasn't uncertain. It was clear. Ethan leaned back slowly, processing everything. His eyes moved between us, between my past and his present. So all this time, he murmured. Yes, I said quietly. He shook his head slightly. I thought he started, then stopped. Because the version he had believed was breaking, piece by piece, and in its place something real was finally standing. He looked at me again, and this time there was something new in his eyes. Not doubt, not anger, but something much more fragile, understanding, not complete, not finished, but beginning. And sometimes that's enough. We stayed longer than I expected. At first, I thought it would be a short visit, just enough for Ethan to hear what he needed, just enough for me to confirm what had lived inside my memory all these years. But something shifted in that living room, something quiet, something human. And once it started, none of us wanted to rush it. Michael stood up at one point and walked into the kitchen, returning with 3 glasses of water. He handed one to Ethan, one to me, then sat back down slowly, his movements deliberate. You deserve to hear the rest of it, he said, looking at Ethan. Ethan nodded, gripping the glass a little tighter than necessary. I'm listening. Michael leaned back slightly, his eyes drifting, not unfocused, but distant, like he was looking through time instead of across the room. There's something your mother didn't tell you, he said. I felt my chest tighten. Ethan looked at me immediately. What? He asked. I didn't answer, because I knew what was coming, and I wasn't sure I was ready for him to hear it. Michael didn't wait. She didn't just lead us out, he said. She stayed behind. The words landed like a shockwave. Ethan blinked. What? His voice was barely above a whisper. I closed my eyes for a moment, because that was the part I had buried the deepest. What does that mean? Ethan pressed. Michael looked at me as if giving me the chance to stop him. I didn't. I couldn't. After she split the unit, Michael continued, there were still people missing, vehicles that had gone dark, signals that never came back. Ethan turned toward me again. You went back? He asked. I opened my eyes slowly. Yes. Why? He demanded. The question wasn't angry. It was something else, something closer to fear. Because they were still out there, I said. That doesn't make sense, he said quickly. You just said it was dangerous. People were disappearing. I know, I said. Then why would you go back? He insisted. Because leaving them wasn't an option. Because leadership doesn't stop when it's convenient. Because some decisions define you. They were my responsibility, I said. Ethan stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. You could have died, he said. Yes, and you just accepted that. I didn't answer right away, because the truth wasn't something you explained. It was something you lived. I didn't think about it that way, I said, finally. Michael leaned forward slightly. She didn't go alone, he added. Ethan looked at him. You went with her, he asked. Michael nodded. Yeah, he said. I did. That seemed to ground something for Ethan, just slightly. What happened? He asked. Michael's expression changed. Not dramatically, but enough. The kind of change that only comes from remembering something you don't talk about often. We found 2 of them. Michael's expression changed. Not dramatically, but enough. The kind of change that only comes from remembering something you don't talk about often. We found 2 of them, he said quietly. Alive. Ethan's breath caught, and the others, he asked. Michael shook his head slowly. Not all of them. Silence filled the room again, but this time it wasn't uncertain. It was heavy, with meaning, with loss, with the kind of truth that doesn't leave room for comfort. She pulled them out, Michael said. Under conditions I still don't fully understand. He looked at me, and I've had years to think about it. Ethan followed his gaze. What does that mean? She pulled them out, Michael said. Under conditions I still don't fully understand. He looked at me, and I've had years to think about it. Ethan followed his gaze. What does that mean? He asked. Michael hesitated. Just for a second. Some things we saw out there? He said slowly. They didn't fit. Ethan frowned. Didn't fit what? Anything. Michael said simply. The word lingered. Uncomfortable. Because now we were stepping back into the part of the story that didn't make sense. That never had. That's not the important part, Michael added quickly. Then what is? Because now we were stepping back into the part of the story that didn't make sense. That never had. That's not the important part, Michael added quickly. Then what is? Ethan asked. Michael leaned forward. The important part is this, he said. Your mother didn't leave anyone behind if she had a choice. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. But some people still didn't make it, he said. Yes, Michael said quietly. Then how is that? Because sometimes, Michael interrupted gently. There are no perfect outcomes. That stopped Ethan. Because it was the kind of truth you don't argue with, even if you want to. I don't understand how she could carry that. Ethan said more to himself than to either of us. I did, because I had been carrying it for years. You don't get used to it, I said quietly. Ethan looked at me. Then, how do you live with it? I held his gaze. You don't, I said. Not completely. The room went still again, but this time it felt different, less tense, more honest. Michael nodded slowly. She's right, he said. You don't move on from something like that. You just learn how to keep going. Ethan looked down at his hands, processing, trying to piece together a version of me that matched what he was hearing. And maybe, for the first time, he was starting to see it. Not as a story, not as something distant, but as something real, something that had shaped me in ways he had never understood before. Why didn't you ever tell me this? He asked quietly. I felt that question settle deep in my chest, because it wasn't just about the past. It was about everything between us. I didn't want you to see me that way, I said. What way? I hesitated. Then, as someone who made decisions that cost people their lives, Ethan's head lifted quickly. That's not what I see, he said. Not yet, I replied. He shook his head. No, he said more firmly this time. That's not what I see. I studied him carefully, trying to understand what he meant. You see someone who tried? He continued. Someone who went back when she didn't have to. Someone who didn't leave people behind. His voice wavered slightly. But you never gave me the chance to see that before. The words hit harder than anything else he had said. Because they weren't angry. They were hurt and honest. I'm giving you that chance now, I said softly. He nodded slowly. I know. Another silence. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It wasn't tense. It was something else. Something fragile. Something new. Understanding. Not perfect. Not complete, but real. Michael stood up again, stretching slightly. You two have a lot to talk about, he said. Ethan looked at him. Thank you, he said. Michael nodded. Don't thank me, he replied. Thank her. Ethan turned toward me again. And for the first time, there was no doubt in his eyes, only something much harder to earn. Respect. And as we stood to leave, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to believe before. The truth hadn't broken us. It had brought us back. The call came a week later. I was in the kitchen when my phone rang, the sound cutting through the quiet of an ordinary morning. Ethan was at the table scrolling through something on his laptop work, I assumed, though his attention had been drifting more often lately. Things between us weren't perfect, but they were better, softer, like something fragile that both of us were trying not to break. I glanced at the screen. General Cole. My chest tightened immediately. I answered. Jacob Whitman speaking. Ms. Whitman? His voice came through steady, as always. We've completed the initial review. Everything inside me went still. I see, I said carefully. There's been a development, he added. Not progress, not update, a development. That word carried weight. What kind of development, I asked. There was a pause on the line. Just long enough to tell me this wasn't simple. Captain Reeves has responded, Cole said. Ethan looked up instantly. He didn't hear the voice, but he knew the shift in my face. What did he say? I asked. Cole exhaled slowly. He denies your account. The words didn't shock me. Not really, but they still landed hard. Of course he denied it. He had lived with that version of the story for decades. Why would he give it up now? What exactly did he say? I pressed. He claims he was present during the critical phase of the mission, Cole replied. That he maintained command authority throughout. I closed my eyes briefly. That's not true. I'm aware of your position, Cole said. My position, I repeated quietly. It's not a position. It's what happened. I understand, he said. But this complicates the process. Of course it did. Truth always does. What happens now? I asked. There will be a formal hearing, he said. A review panel, witness statements, cross-examination. My grip tightened on the phone. A hearing, I echoed. Yes. Ethan was standing now, watching me closely. What kind of hearing? I asked. The kind where both accounts are evaluated under oath, Cole said. Under oath. The words sent a chill through me. Because this wasn't just about records anymore. This was public, official, permanent. When? I asked. In 2 weeks, he replied. 2 weeks. after decades of silence. We had 2 weeks. Will I need to testify? I asked. Yes, he said, as will Sergeant Alvarez. I glanced at Ethan. He already knew the answer before I spoke it. And Reeves? I asked. Yes, of course. The man who had taken the credit would now stand in the same room, facing me, after all these years. What about the records? I asked. The discrepancies you mentioned. They support your account, Cole said, but they're not conclusive on their own. So it comes down to testimony. Yes, truth against truth, memory against memory, silence against denial. Ms. Whitman. Cole added, his tone shifting slightly. There's something else you should be aware of. My chest tightened again. What is it? Captain Reeves has retained legal counsel. Of course he had. This wasn't just about correcting a mistake. This was about protecting a legacy. And me? I asked. You're entitled to representation as well, he said. I almost laughed. A quiet, humorless sound. I've been representing myself for decades, I said. This is different, he replied. Yes, it was, because this time, the truth had to stand on its own. I'll be there, I said. I expected you would, Cole replied. The call ended. I lowered the phone slowly. The kitchen felt smaller, quieter. Ethan stepped closer. What happened? He asked. I looked at him, at the concern in his eyes, at the way he was no longer standing apart from this. They're holding a hearing, I said. His brow furrowed. A hearing like court. Not exactly, I said, but close enough. And Reeves? He asked. He's contesting everything. Ethan's jaw tightened. Of course he is. Yes. Silence settled between us. Then, so what do you do? He asked. I looked down at my hands. They were steady, stronger than I expected. I tell the truth, I said. Is that enough? He asked. I met his gaze. I don't know, I admitted. And if it's not that question, that was the real one. The one I hadn't allowed myself to fully face yet. Because for years, the truth had lived quietly inside me, unchallenged, untested. But now, it would be questioned, doubted, pulled apart in front of people who had no idea what it had cost to carry it. If it's not, I said slowly, then at least I finally said it. Ethan studied me, longer this time. You're not afraid, he asked. I thought about that, about the hearing, about Reeves, about everything that could go wrong. I am, I said. Then why do it? Because silence isn't safety anymore. Because truth matters. Because you deserve to know. I stepped closer. Because some things are worth being afraid for, I said. He didn't respond immediately, but something in his expression softened, shifted. Then I'm coming with you, he said. The words caught me off guard. You don't have to. I want to, he interrupted. A beat. I need to. I looked at him carefully, at the determination in his eyes, at the way he was no longer questioning whether I was telling the truth, but standing beside it. You understand what that means? I asked. It means I'll be there, he said simply. Not dramatic, not emotional, just certain. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was ours. 2 weeks later, We stood outside the federal building. The sky was overcast, the air heavy with the kind of stillness that comes before something important. Ethan stood beside me, close. Not as a child, but as an equal, a witness, a support. "You ready?" he asked. I looked at the doors, at everything waiting on the other side. No, I wasn't ready. Not completely, but I stepped forward anyway. "Yes," I said, and together, we walked inside. The room was colder than I expected, not physically, but in the way silence settles when people are waiting for something to break. The hearing room wasn't large, just a long table, a panel of officials at the front, and a few rows of chairs behind us. No audience, no cameras, but it still felt exposed. Because for the first time, the truth wasn't mine alone anymore. It belonged to everyone in that room. Ethan sat behind me, not close enough to interfere, but close enough that I could feel him there, steady, present, and that mattered more than I had expected. "Ms. Whitman," one of the panel members said, his voice measured and official, "you may begin your statement." I stood slowly. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me, after everything I had thought they would. But instead, there was something else. Clarity. I was not assigned to lead that mission I began. My voice echoed slightly in the quiet room. But I made the decision to do so when the situation changed. Across the table, Captain Daniel Reeves sat still. Too still. His uniform crisp. His posture perfect. The picture of control. He didn't look at me. Not yet. "I assessed the risk," I continued. "I identified inconsistencies in the briefing, and when communication broke down, I made the call to act. The words came easier than I expected, because I wasn't explaining. I was remembering. I gave orders, I said. I split the unit. I directed the retreat." A pause. I returned for the missing personnel. That part shifted the room. I felt it, even if no one spoke. "Did you have authorization to do so?" one of the panel members asked. "No," I said. "Did you understand the risks?" "Yes." "And yet you proceeded?" "Yes." Silence. Then, if no one spoke. "Did you have authorization to do so?" one of the panel members asked. "No," I said. "Did you understand the risks?" "Yes." "And yet you proceeded?" "Yes." Silence. Then, why that question again? It had followed me through everything, from Ethan, from myself, and now, from them. I looked up, directly at the panel. "Because they were still out there," I said. A pause. Then, "And because no one else was going to go back." The room held that answer for a moment, weighed it, measured it. Then the next voice came. "Captain Reeves," one of them said, "you may respond." Reeves stood, smooth, controlled, like this was just another formality. "I maintained command authority throughout the mission," he said. "At no point did I relinquish control." His voice was calm, confident, practiced. "I made the strategic decisions necessary to preserve the unit," he continued. My chest tightened, because this was the version that had lived in records for years. The version that had replaced mine. "You're stating under oath that you were present during the critical phase of the operation?" the panel asked. "Yes," Reeves said without hesitation. A lie. Clear, direct, but delivered so smoothly, it almost sounded like truth. "And Ms. Whitman's involvement?" they asked. He paused, just long enough to make it seem thoughtful. "She was present," he said, "but not in a command capacity." There it was. The erasure. Clean, simple, convenient. I felt something rise in my chest. Not anger, not panic. Something steadier, stronger. Truth. May I respond? I asked. The panel nodded. I turned slightly, not toward them, but toward him. For the first time, our eyes met, and in that moment, I saw it. Not confidence, not certainty, fear, buried deep. But there. You left, I said. The words cut through the room. Reeves' expression flickered. Barely. But I saw it. You turned back before the worst of it, I continued. That is not accurate, he said quickly. It is, I replied. The room grew sharper, tighter. Do you deny ordering a withdrawal before the engagement escalated? I asked. His jaw tightened. I made a tactical decision. You left, I repeated, this time louder, clearer, no room for interpretation. A pause. Longer now. Then I repositioned, he said. The shift in wording didn't go unnoticed. Not by me. And not by the panel. Sergeant Alvarez, one of them said you may give your testimony. Michael stood. Steady, grounded. Unlike Reeves, he didn't need to perform. I followed her orders, he said. Simple, direct. No hesitation. Why? The panel asked. Because they made sense, he replied. And Captain Reeves. Michael didn't even look at him. He wasn't there, he said. Silence. Heavy. Definitive. 3 accounts, 1 truth. And now, it was starting to align. The panel conferred quietly, notes passed, expressions shifting. Then, based on the testimony and the reviewed documentation, one of them began. We are prepared to issue a preliminary determination. My heart pounded once, hard, then settled. Captain Reeves' account is inconsistent with the available evidence, he continued. Reeves didn't move, but his shoulders tightened. Ms. Whitman's actions during the mission demonstrate de facto command leadership under emergent conditions. The words echoed, formal, official, but beneath them, something deeper. Recognition. Truth. At this time, the panel member continued, we recommend correction of the official record to reflect her role. A breath left my lungs, slow, unsteady. After all these years, it was finally spoken, out loud. Additionally, he added commendations previously unrecognized will be formally acknowledged. I didn't move, didn't speak, because the moment was too full, too heavy, too real. Beside me, I felt Ethan shift, closer. Then a hand on my shoulder. Light, but certain. I turned slightly, just enough to see him. His eyes weren't questioning anymore. They weren't doubtful. They weren't distant. They were full of pride, of understanding, of something we had both been trying to find. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about being right. It wasn't just about the medals, or the record, or the past. It was about being seen, fully, truthfully, finally. The hearing ended not with applause, but with quiet, respectful, earned, as we stepped outside into the open air. The weight didn't disappear, but it shifted, lifted, just enough to breathe. Ethan walked beside me. Not behind, not ahead, beside. You were telling the truth, he said. I glanced at him, a small, tired smile forming. I always was. He nodded. I know that now. That was enough. More than enough. Because the truth had done what it needed to do. Not perfectly. Not without cost. But completely. And for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying it alone. The truth doesn't always arrive with applause. Sometimes it comes quietly after years of doubt, silence, and misunderstanding. Sometimes it asks more from us than we think we can give. Courage, patience. The willingness to stand alone before others are ready to stand with us. Jacob Whitman didn't just fight to prove a story right. She fought to reclaim her voice. And in doing so, she rebuilt something even more important than recognition. She rebuilt trust. With her son, with herself. Life has a way of testing us in moments where the easy choice is silence, where walking away feels safer, where keeping the peace means hiding the truth. But real peace doesn't come from silence. It comes from honesty, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's late, even when it changes everything. So I want to ask you, have you ever held on to a truth that no one else believed? Would you still stand by it if it meant risking everything? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone, and if this story moved, you don't forget to like and subscribe. There are more stories like this, stories about courage, family, and the quiet strength it takes to do what's right. You're not alone.